Hello and welcome to Crafting a Revolution, the podcast. My name is Katie Freeman and I'm your host. I am bringing you interviews every Wednesday and Friday of female and non-binary makers of all kinds from all over the world. Today's guest is Adriana of Texas DIY Mama. Adriana really has a pretty great journey and story into kind of the DIY and woodworking world, starting with just being fascinated with her uncles and using tools and being finished carpenters growing up. So that kind of really sparked her interest and got her into this world. So I know you're going to really enjoy this interview. Before we hop on into it, though, with Adriana, I want to give a big shout out and thanks to the Revolution Pod Squad over on Patreon. So thank you so much, Annette, 513 Woodworks, Katie Thompson, Women of Woodworking, Kevin, Lefty's Workshop, Christy, Twisted Twine, Jeremy Speece, Sammy, Go Sammy Lee, Sven, Dwarf Size Workshop, Rachel, Moody Makes, Bonnie, Tool Mom Bonnie, toolmomstore.com, Laura, Oakley Soap Company, Mary Lou, Made by Mary Lou, Brandy, Studio Obey, Lee, The Rainbow Carver, Ellen, Little Bear Furniture, and Ethan Carter Designs. Thank you all so very much for your ongoing and continued support, helping me to produce 2 episodes a week, every week. If you would like your name to be added to the list at the start of every episode, you certainly can have that done. Just go to patreon.com/crafting a revolution and check out the different tiers over there and how you can join up with the Revolution Pod Squad. And a note on that, since the name change and new logo art has been completed, there will be new stickers and new t-shirts coming out for those over on Patreon. So just keep that in mind as we're going forward here. I hope to get those going very shortly. All right, with no further ado, here's Adriana of Texas DIY Mama. All right, well, I like to start by having my guests introduce themselves. So would you please do that for me?
Sure. So my name is Adriana, and I am the content creator behind Texas DIY Mama. I am a mom and a wife. I have 2 young kids. I have a 5-year-old and a 4-year-old. So lots of fun right now.
Oh my goodness. Are they Irish twins, as in less than a year apart, or?
No, they're actually 19 months apart.
Okay.
So there is, they are close together, but not too close together. So for a few months there, they're 4 and 5 and, 3 and 4 and whatnot.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
it's but my oldest is autistic. So, developmentally, I feel like they're almost at about the same level, so yeah, lots of fun. Lots of pulling them off furniture, climbing all the things.
Yep. Yeah, that's a constant conversation in my house as well. Well, mine are a little bit old. My youngest is 5.5. And so she just started. Today was her first day of kindergarten. Yeah. She's both excited and nervous. I'm sure there will be so much to talk about when we get home tonight.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to start with a pretty, I guess, like kind of broad question, which is, I really just want to, know more about your story. Like, where'd you grow up, and from there to like, how'd you get to being the content creator behind, DIY Mom?
So I was actually born in Mexico. We moved here when I was about 4. So, I didn't know a lick of English at all. And, I started kindergarten shortly after we moved, which was kind of scary because I remember crying every single day the first week of school because I didn't understand what anybody was telling me. I had one little friend that was also Mexican, that spoke both English and Spanish. So she was like my only friend at the beginning, but I think like most kids, after a couple of weeks, I started picking it up, and and then I was fine. But that whole transition, like the whole culture shock, for me as a young little girl, it was pretty rough. And then I think I want to say probably, so we moved here with my mom and my sister. So my mom became a single parent, and we lived with family when we first got here. And I'm Mexican, so I have a lot of uncles and sisters. I mean, uncles and aunts, and cousins. And so, we were staying with family. A lot of my mom's brothers, well, actually all of them were or are still finished carpenters. And all of her sisters clean houses, so I come from very, very humble beginnings. And I remember, growing up, so in Mexican culture, it's like the woman does the cooking, the cleaning, taking care of the kids and all those things. And so, but my mom had to play both roles, you know what I mean? So she had to like work. I remember her working a lot. So a lot of times we had like cousins taking us to school, or aunts and uncles, and whatnot. Like it was kind of like a whole village, that was helping to raise us. And actually my dad's brother, he ended up coming to the States a few years after we came, and he ended living with us. My mom knew him, like she met him, he was like a young kid, and then he came here. And so he moved in with us. He decided to stay. And he was also a finished carpenter. I think that was just the easy path to go for everybody who came to the States, And so I remember him and I were very close, and I loved going out, into our little patio with him. That's back then, he would make, miter boxes. Like he would, I remember him using like the handsaw and making like the angles and all these things. And I remember I loved it. I would go out there with him and just sit there and just watch him, and he would use his drill and all these things. And so I started becoming interested in, especially in learning about his tools, and I remember he would let me, help him. Like he would let me, play with his drill and, all these things. And I remember my mom didn't like it because in her mind, like she wanted me inside, learning to cook with my sister, and doing all the things that, a good little Mexican girl would know how to do. But I didn't want to. I wanted to be outside with my uncle. And so as I got older, again, because, my uncle, he moved on, he got married, he started his own family. And so it was just the three of us, just my mom, my sister, and I. And so again, since my mom worked so much, stuff would happen in the house, like a cabinet hinge would come loose, or, something like a piece of furniture would break or whatever. And there was nobody to fix it for us. It was just us, and my uncle, he had actually left behind like a box of like random extra tools. I mean, anything from like screwdrivers. I remember like there was like a spade drill bit in there, and I was like, whoa, what can I use this for? And so I remember, I started saying, you know what, I can fix this. I know how to use the screwdriver, and I know how to use, this and that. And so then I started fixing stuff around the house. And if we would buy furniture, I was the one that would put it together, and so that's where like I started my love for just like tools and putting things together. That's where it started. And then as I got older, when I got into college, I told my mom, I said, Mom, I want a drill. And she was like, what do you need a drill for? I said, well, because there's all sorts of things that I could use it for. I could use it like to hang my picture frames, to do just random stuff like fix cabinet hinges, or whatever. And so, she was kind of reluctant. And actually a family friend ended up giving me my first drill. And I remember, because all my uncles, again, they were finished carpenters. And I remember I had this cousin that was also a finished carpenter, and we would talk all the time. And I remember him telling me, we would talk about tools because I would ask him questions and stuff. And I remember him telling me, okay, if you're going to get a drill, it's got to be either a Makita or a DeWalt. Don't get any other brand, And so in my mind, I was like, okay, it's like, I feel like he was kind of like brainwashing me, So when I asked, my mom for a drill, I said, I need it to be a Makita drill. And, my mom had no idea what, Makita was. I mean, she barely knew what a drill was, And so, this friend ended up getting me a Makita drill. And so I did all sorts of things with that drill. Like, I loved using it. I wanted to use it for everything. And then, I ended up going, because I moved away to college. So I had my drill with me and did all sorts of work with my drill. I moved back home. And when I moved back home after college, my uncle, he actually runs a finished carpentry business. So he asked me to come work for him, more on an administrative level. And so I said, okay, sure. And then that's where like my eyes were open, because it's like I learned about, different types of trim and, about doors and, hardware and all of these things. It was, I loved it. It was, for me, it was like a kid at Disney, like learning about all these things, I loved it. And so since, when I learned all of those things, again, I have my uncles talking to me in the back of my head, like, okay, if you're going to get tools, this is the brand you got to go with, So that's how I started, like in my mind, like planning, like, oh, eventually, like I want to actually do hands-on, because I knew like what was happening behind the scenes. Like, you bought the material, you would prep it at the shop, then you would ship it out to the job site for the installers to work. And I started doing, project managing. So I would go to the job sites, I would order the materials, make sure everything, was ready for the installers to go and whatnot. But I wasn't actually doing the work. And so, but I was like, I want to learn how to do this, And so eventually I actually ended up leaving that job because I decided to change my degree, or actually get another degree. I ended up going into nursing. And so I kind of abandoned that for many years. But then when I got married and when we bought our first house, that's when I was like, okay, if I'm going to do it, now I can do it, because this is my house. I can do whatever I want to it. And so I kind of started just DIYing, like a lot of like, painting. I changed, the color. I painted, our bedroom. I painted my kids' nurseries, all of those things. But I want to say about a year, I think it's been a little over a year. That's when I bought my first miter saw. And after that, it was like, okay, now I felt like I could do anything. And so that's, I actually started posting some of my stuff that I was doing on my Facebook. And I remember, because again, it's like everybody, they knew that I was a nurse and whatnot. Nobody ever saw, like, I was younger. There was no Facebook. I mean, I think Facebook came out like around the time I was like in college or something, so people didn't know that I was doing these things. I wasn't posting about it. And then I started posting it when I moved into my house, which we've lived here for 8 years. So, so friends and family were like, what? Like you know how to do those things, and a lot of it was trial and error. You kind of pick up things along the way. And so I think like, since I was getting such a like positive response and reaction from all these pictures that I was posting. And I thought to myself, like, you know what, maybe I should start a blog, or maybe I should like something easier. Cause I just didn't feel like I had at the time. I mean, I already had both my kids and whatnot. I was a mom, and so I thought, okay, well, what if I just open an Instagram, because I felt like a lot of my DIY was starting to take over my Facebook and my Instagram. And again, because I am an autism mom, we don't live very close to a lot of family. So a lot of my family doesn't see my son's progress. And so I wanted my personal Instagram and Facebook to be more about my family, where I shared about my son and his progress and whatnot. And I felt like DIY was taking it over. And so I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to open a separate account and just see what happens. I had no idea everything, like content creation, like, your feed, you want it to look like, you could get sponsorships. Like I didn't know any of that. So I would just, post my pictures.
Hey makers. So today's podcast episode is sponsored in part by Alicia Van Osdal, who is the owner of Basil Blue Design Company. Alicia is a maker of all things, really. Her focus is on beautiful craftsmanship through woodworking, repurposing, refinishing, art, and sculpture. Her background includes 30 years of graphic design, logos, and branding. If you have an idea or concept and need a creative solution or graphic design, you can email Alicia directly at Alicia, and that is ALICIA at basilblue.com. Or you can visit her website at www.basilblue.com. And fun fact, Alicia actually designed the logo for Crafting Revolution. So that is an example of the impeccable work you can expect if that is something you are in the market for. So be sure to look up Alicia again at her website, basilblue.com. All right, let's get back into the action.
And I remember, as I started spending more time on all of these other DIY accounts and started seeing like, oh, this is how you post, like you want to do the after picture and then do the before, so you can get a better, captivate more of your audience. I didn't know any of that. And so when I started learning that, I was like, oh, like, okay, I see it. I get it, started picking up stuff about content creation along the way. And then I decided, you know what? Why not go for it? If I'm already doing this, I'm going to post pictures anyway. I'm going to do the DIY anyway. Sure. Like I want to learn how to do this, So then that's basically how like this whole account came to be because it started out as kind of like, oh, this is just something I want to do for my home, and I'm here, like my friends and family, look what I did, but then it became something like, oh, wow, there's a community, like there's a lot of people who I feel, because I mean, for me, I get a lot of inspiration from watching others doing their DIY. And I thought to myself, like, maybe people look at like that to me in my account, so it's like, what am I bringing of value to someone who would be interested in DIY? Like, who's my audience, And so that's when I started just kind of changing like the way I posted and what I shared in stories and whatnot. And now here we are.
Is this your like full-time work now?
Yeah. I mean, it's my full time, as in like, I don't have any other job other than I watch my kids.
Right.
I don't do nursing anymore. I worked up until my youngest, right before she was born. That's the last time I worked. I decided to abandon my nursing career, or at least put it on pause for now, because especially when we found out that our oldest was on the spectrum. And so really my full-time job is being a mom, but content creation is what I use kind of like as my outlet. Because I will say, like, one of the things that was really hard for me when I found out that my child was autistic and we had a diagnosis, I think, was just like accepting that that's what it was. You know what I mean? And so I was obviously, I was devastated. It's like you think, and again, I worked with adults because I'm a nurse. So I worked with adults my whole nursing career. And so the little bit that I knew about autism was just what I had read in nursing school. And so when we had a diagnosis, for me, it was like, oh my goodness, like my life is going to change. It's going to be hard, this and this, like you think all of these worst case scenarios, and so I needed something like, what am I going to do for me? Like something that where I could think, where I felt like, because I do think in general, when you're a nurse, one of the biggest satisfactions you get is from knowing that you made a difference in someone's life and you helped them get better, and I felt like with my son, there was very little hope for that. So I needed to do something that I felt I could fix or I could make better. And I think that's why DIY for me, it gave me that, you know? And so yeah, so that's why like I don't DIY like for a living per se. I have gotten some sponsorships. My biggest and proudest sponsorship is I just worked with Home Depot on a project. But other than that, I'm not full-time into this really, you know, because, you know, my children come first and obviously my son. And so, but yes, but DIY for me is what helps me get through a lot of the hardships that come with parenting an autistic child.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it makes complete sense. When you have situations in life that you have no control over, it's nice to have something that you have complete control over.
Yes.
For the most part. There's usually always something still with a project that comes up that's unexpected, but but I mean, we still are able to fix it, right? It's not it's not something that we still have absolutely no control over. So, you know, you're talking a bit about like kind of growing up in the, I guess, like the cultural expectations of, you know, what, I guess what you were expected to do. What's that been like to, I guess, kind of break away from that or, you know, go beyond those expectations?
So I think I've actually had a really great experience. I think, you know, working with my uncle helped a lot. I never felt while working with my uncle, I never felt like, oh no, like I'm a girl, like I shouldn't be doing this, you know, nope. He actually was very encouraging. Excuse me, very encouraging. I remember when I first started working with him, he told me, he said, look, I just want you to know, you know, once you start going out in the field with me, because, you know, he mentored me and he taught me and whatnot. He said, you know, it's a man's world. It's construction, you know, you're going to meet all sorts of people. You know, you're going to meet people at job sites that are going to look at you and think like, you don't know what you're doing. You're probably going to get a lot of catcalling from the workers that see you walking the job site. Okay. If you ever have any issue with anybody, you let me know, you know, and I do think, I feel because a lot of all his workers actually really respected him. And so he actually would, when he would introduce me, you know, to like contractors and whatnot, he would always introduce me as his daughter. So everybody thought that he was my dad, you know, and so I think like that would change the way they would, you know, address me and talk to me and whatnot. I knew, because, you know, my mom, again, she was a single mom, so she raised us to be really strong. And so I was never intimidated, even though, yes, I remember like walking job sites and, you know, for example, if the contractor would be there, I would say, hey, you know, I have questions about this or whatever. And at first it was like, who are you? Like, and what are you doing here? You know? And then, you know, somebody would be like, oh yeah, that's my uncle's name is Juan. So it'd be like, oh, that's Juan's daughter. And so it's like all of a sudden like, oh, okay. So what can I help you with? You know? So I never felt like I didn't belong. And I think because my uncle was always very encouraging. Now, I think in general, like my family, when I started my DIY account, my family, a lot of my family was kind of shocked. Like, what? You know how to do that? You know how to use a miter saw? Where'd you learn that? You know? But overall, like, excuse me, I always liked the challenge. Especially, I think it just feels good. You know, you walk onto a site and people expect like, oh, look at this girl wearing makeup and her hair done. What does she know about construction? You know, but for me, it was like, I know my stuff. Let's sit down and talk about it. You know, So it was something that I enjoyed to do.
Mm-hmm. Did it take a good amount of time though to gain, I guess, your own respect without it being borrowed?
Yeah, I think so. I think at the beginning, because yeah, at the beginning it was a huge learning curve for me, learning all of the materials. I mean, you know, people who do this for a living, like they'll walk onto a site and they'll look at like the different profiles of the trim and they like, oh, that's this profile and that's this and this is this material, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't know any of that stuff at the beginning, So what my uncle did is he literally, this was in California. In California, Southern California, there's a big company that's called L&L, and they supply a lot of trim and doors and whatnot. He literally gave me a catalog that has thousands of products in it, and he said, okay, you need to learn all of these things. And again, I was very motivated because I was like, I am going to learn all these things, so I did. Like, I went through the book, and I think for me, because I'm always, I like making the connection, like, okay, this is what the textbook is, this is what real life is. And so making that connection when I started going on the job sites, it was kind of like, oh, I know what that one is, and whatnot. And so I think at the beginning, yes, it took a little while because I felt like I was so new. I was learning so much, but it didn't take very long. I want to say it took probably about 6 months for me to like learn most of the things and the processes of how the company worked pretty much. And what helped too is my uncle had, because he was busy. I mean, he's the owner.
Right.
Excuse me. So he didn't always have time to like teach me everything, but he had a project manager that was like one of the most patient men I've ever met. He would sit down with me and like teach me processes. Like, he would be like, okay, when you're ordering this and we're talking about needing this is what it is. And so that really helped. And I think after a while, like, because I knew my stuff, because I loved being in the environment, then I could stand my own, you know what I mean?
Hey, Pod Squad. This week's episode is brought to you in part by the Empowered Makers Online Festival. What is that, you may ask? Well, it is a totally free DIY party designed to inspire, empower, and educate so that you can stop that Pinterest scroll and be the powerhouse DIYing woman that you're totally capable of being. During this 4-day online event, you'll hear exclusive presentations from 12 incredible women, DIYers, and craftswomen covering topics like beginner electrical work, how to flip furniture, making time for DIY, and so much more. If you're ready to stop just dreaming about DIY and making and start taking some big freaking action, join us from September 27th through 30th for the Empowered Makers Online Festival. Can't wait to see what you create after this event. To register, just head on over to empoweredmakers.com/revolution. Again, that is empoweredmakers.com/revolution. I can tell you I am one of those 12 presenters, and this is a totally free event. So head on over to empoweredmakers.com/revolution and join us from the 27th through the 30th of this month. All right, let's head back on into the episode. So I have to ask then, like, why leave that to go pursue nursing?
So, okay, so my first degree was in accounting, and then I got a master's in business administration. And because I love numbers, I love accounting in general. But what started happening is, again, because it is a man's world, okay? So I was working a ton. I was working like 60 hours a week, anywhere from 60 to 70 hours per week, Monday through Friday. Sometimes I would go in on weekends, on Sundays. And at the end of the day and at the end of the week, I started feeling like, okay, it doesn't matter how many hours I work, there's always work. It's like never ending. And then I started thinking, because at this point I was in my mid 20s. So I started thinking like, okay, you know what? If I ever want to get married, if I ever want to have kids, when am I going to have the time to spend with my family if this is the way work is? You know what I mean? And so that's when I started thinking like, you know what? I don't know that I could sustain this for very long and be happy and feel like I'm being a good wife and a good mom, especially, you know, being a mom. And so that's when I started thinking like, you know what, maybe this isn't the direction that I want to go. When I was in business school, I had actually thought about going into nursing, because one of the things that really attracted me about nursing in the first place was, you know, when my grandparents were alive, they were very sick, especially my grandpa. My grandpa was a coal miner back in Mexico. And so he had what they call coal miner's lung. So COPD, you know, always had all sorts of issues. He developed a lot of heart issues. And so a lot of like respiratory problems. So he was, especially during the last years of his life, he was in and out of the hospital. And you know, and I think, you know, it's just in our culture, like if someone is at the hospital from our family, everybody is there. Like the immediate family. Oh, sorry about that. Let me put it on Do Not Disturb. And I lost. I'm trying to find you. I can't find you. Okay, there you are. Okay. Sorry about that.
No problem.
So anyways, I had, you know, he was always in and out of the hospital. We were always there, all of us. And so one of the things that we would do as a family is we would take turns staying with him, because some of the nurses didn't speak Spanish. He didn't speak any English. And so I remember, you know, sometimes it would be my turn. I would spend the night at the hospital with him. And I remember I would always, think, you know, I would see the nurses doing, you know, their nursing or whatever. And I always thought like, you know what, that must be such a satisfying job, you know, but I felt like, okay, I don't know that I could do it. You know, after my grandfather passed away, he passed away while I was in college, while I was getting my master's, you know, that sparked that in me. You know, I thought to myself, like, you know what, I would want to help somebody's family member the way those nurses cared for my grandpa, especially when it comes to, you know, patients who speak no English. You know, I mean, even if you speak English, you go to the hospital, it's like you're in the ICU, it's scary. You know what I mean? When you don't understand the language, it's even worse, you know? And so for me, like, I thought to myself, like, you know what? I want to make a difference in somebody's life, you know, the business world and construction and all of those things. I loved it, but I just felt like it didn't matter how much I gave. I wasn't making a difference to anybody. You know what I mean? And I wanted to make a difference to someone. And so that's when I decided, okay, you know what? I'm young, I'm single, you know, I can do whatever I want right now. If I'm going to do it, I need to do it now. Like, I don't want to look back and regret, you know, that I didn't do it. And so if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. And so I remember talking to my mom and telling her, you know, Mom, I think I want to go back to school. You know, I think I want to try nursing. And she was all about it. She said, yes, I think that's great. You know, whatever you need, you know, we'll do it together, you know, this and this. So yeah, so I ended up going back to nursing. And I finished. I actually met my husband while I was in nursing school. So, you know, it ended up working out. And yeah, and then, you know, we got married, we moved, And then I worked and I loved it. I loved it. But again, after I had my kids, and especially after my son, I decided, you know what, I need to put my career on hold, which was actually really hard. I mean, I cried because I loved nursing. I loved it. I still love it. But I just felt like, okay, my family needs me right now. I can always go back, and now I'm like, I would love to go back, probably not on a full-time basis. Like probably like a per diem, they call it. But I mean, I also love woodworking and I love DIY stuff. So for now, I'm happy doing that.
Yeah. So what are the projects, I guess, you like that give you the most joy to do around the house?
I want to say, for the most part, the projects where I transform something. You know what I mean? Like where this is what it used to look like. This is what it looks like now. And I did that. You know what I mean? I think one of the most satisfying projects in general is our furniture flips. Because, and I think it's hilarious because, okay, my husband, he's one of those people that like, he doesn't see potential. He sees it the way it is. And he's like, what are you going to do with this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think for me, that's, one of the things that's the most satisfying. Like, oh, you wait, I'm going to transform this. You wait and see what it's going to look like, And so I think those for me are some of the funnest projects. Because you take something and you make it into something completely different, and yeah, just transformations in general. One of the things that I do want to do a little bit more of is like woodworking stuff, like, joinery, and all those things. All those things I feel like, again, as a carpenter, like we don't appreciate when we look at a piece of furniture. A lot of people don't appreciate like if there is complicated joinery and whatnot. They just see the piece of furniture. But I think now that I've been doing this for a while, now I appreciate it. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's like amazing, like craftsmanship right there. And so for me, like that's something that I want to start trying. Everything, I feel like everything in DIY and in woodworking is like you kind of just try, you learn by trying,
Yep.
And so that's one of the things that I do look forward to getting a little bit more into. I have a cousin that I didn't even know, but he works for a lumber yard. And I live in Texas. Most of my mom's family lives in California. So when I went out there a few months ago, he said, hey, you should come pay me a visit, at my job. So I was like, okay, sure. And he took me through through the whole place pretty much. He showed me all the different species of wood and whatnot. And I was like, this is amazing, and he was like, here, you want a piece of zebra wood? Here, take this one. You want some oak? Here's the white oak, blah, blah. So, all of those, I think that field trip, we called it, just like ignited this new like passion in me, like, oh, okay, I want to do this, I want to give it, give it a try. I still haven't because I have other things that I've been working on, but that's definitely something on my list that I'm like, I want to do something like a little more advanced, more like woodworking type of stuff,
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always like I like watching that transition for people's especially women, when it's like going from kind of like construction lumber furniture making to hardwood furniture making.
Yes.
It's just, I don't know, so much more goes into it.
Yes.
There's like a lot of work you have to do, for breaking down lumber and stuff like that. But it's fun to watch because it does seem to, I don't know, like open up things a little bit more, like give you more options.
Yes.
to do stuff with. What's been your biggest project you've done? Hey makers, today's episode is sponsored in part by toolmomstore.com. At toolmomstore.com, you can find any and all tool-based merchandise for all genders, all sizes. They've got mugs, they've got shirts, all kinds of cool stuff. I have one of the shirts myself that has the hashtag woodwork her on it. And I also have a couple of the mugs that define what and who is a tool chick. So super excited with the merchandise that I have. I know that you will be satisfied as well. And also great discount for those of you who listen to the podcast. At checkout, if you enter the code MAKERMOM, you will get a 20% discount off any of the merchandise that you buy. So that's just toolmomstore.com. All right, let's head back into the action.
I want to say the biggest one is probably the one that I just did with Home Depot. So, you've heard of like the 1 room challenge that, from Better Homes and Gardens. So I was going to do the 1 room challenge. I've done one. And so I did the one in the fall of last year. The one for the spring, I was going to do it. But there was a few delays, like we needed to change the carpet in the area, and, COVID, like everything is like behind and whatnot. So we couldn't get the carpet in time and whatnot. So I had to just abandon that idea. And so then I actually had applied with Home Depot. I pitched them the project. It's a playroom that we're redoing, or that I'm redoing. And so one of the things that, that I wanted to build was a loft bed for my kids, because so that playroom became their playroom, but it was more of a like, okay, this is too big to fit anywhere else. Let's just put it in there, Right. Yeah. So it was full of, just toys, and they were outgrowing a lot of them. We had this little indoor playground that, my son, he's over 50 pounds now. So that little playground was like for toddlers. And I was like, he's going to break that wood. No, we need to get rid of it. So it's just like, I was like, they just need a better space, And so, I had told my husband, I said, hey, I want to get them a loft bed, because one of the things, especially my son, he likes, a lot of autistic children, they love like enclosed small spaces. So like if we ever go to the store, like if we go to Costco, my son, if he sees like, they have like the racks or whatever, and he sees like a small space in between like the applesauce and the jelly or whatever, he wants to go in there. And so I had told my husband, I said, look, I want to make something that has kind of like a little like roof on it, or something where he can like go under it, and feel like he's enclosed and whatnot. I think he would really enjoy that, and maybe like add some lights, like color changing lights and whatnot, just something, that would, stimulate him, something he would like, because he loves lights. And so, so my husband was like, sure. And so when I started looking online, like, I mean, they have all sorts of loft beds online, you can get one at Walmart, and it's not that expensive. But I also felt like, okay, both him and his sister, they love climbing everything, like how long would something like this last if they're like hanging on it and climbing it and all of these things? Like, I don't know, for $200, how long that's going to last.
Right.
And so I actually reached out to Tylin from Bitterroot DIY. And I said, hey, I had seen that she had made some plans for Monica at House of Esperanza for her son's bed. So I reached out to Tylin and I said, hey, I saw that you made these plans. This is what I'm looking for. Would you be willing to make some plans for a loft bed for me? Because at that point, I didn't feel like I had enough experience like in SketchUp or anything like that. I mean, it would just, my drawings would literally just be like on a paper. And, and my concern was like, if these kids are climbing it and both of them are on top of there, how do I know like the weight if it's going to support their weight and all these things. So when I reached out to her, she was like, okay, sure. Yeah, I can make some plans for you. So she made some plans. We worked on like, okay, this is what I want. I want the ladder here. I want, it's kind of like a little house, blah, blah, blah. And so, I don't know if you've ever seen her plans. It's like super detailed, gives you all the cut lists and all these things. So I got my materials. By then Home Depot reached back out to me and said they'd approved my project. And so I built this bed. And then I wanted a climbing wall on the side to give them like another option to climb. So I built the climbing wall, and then I just added a few other elements, like sensory stuff. Like I found these little puck lights that change color, like they have a remote, or you can push on them and they change color. And I think that's one of like my proudest DIYs, because, I felt like, okay, this has to be done right, or else it's not gonna, number one, it's not gonna look right. And two, it's not gonna stand, all of the hanging off of it and whatnot. So, there were little details that I changed about from Tylen's plans. Like, for example, like instead of just adding extra pieces, I used a router, and I, made a groove for the slats, and I did some half flaps, to mount the bed frame, just to give it a little, just because it made me feel better that it would be sitting in the groove versus it just being, on the side with like the carriage bolts and whatnot. So yeah, that's definitely my proudest DIY so far, because it's something that my kids can enjoy too. It doesn't just look nice, but it's something that my kids are actually like enjoying, and they love it, and I think as a mom, that's like one of the things that brings you the most joy, when you see your kids happy, and especially if you're building something that makes them happy.
Right.
So, yeah, that's my proudest.
We did a loft bed for our son for Christmas last year. He didn't. I wish he would play in it more, because we did the same thing. It was it's not for like sleeping in, it's strictly for playing on. It's down in our finished basement, that's been turned into the giant kid jungle gym down here, but it's a very same thing. It's like, I just wanted something that could grow with them, because both of mine, I mean, my son's 8 and my daughter's 5.5 now, so it's like they're out of the toddler like play sets, that we can have inside. So it's like, how do we upscale this? Because I still want to give them a place, especially with COVID. Like really a lot of that was like born out of COVID, because it's like we can't, especially we're in Iowa, so during winter months it's like, there's outdoor activities, but you're not going to be outdoors for 4 hours. Like, so I have to give you a place to run off your energy somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah. It sounds like you're looking forward to, probably getting into more like hardwoods and woodworking and furniture and stuff like that. How's your shop space equipped now?
So, we have a 3-car garage, and we only use 2 of the spaces. So the third space is where I have all my tools, all my stuff. I have pretty much every tool that, like major tool that I would need right now. I have a miter saw, I have like a jigsaw and circular saw, whatnot. I just got a table saw, which was super scary but exciting at the same time. And I think for now I'm okay. Although, I do wish, again, because the guidance that I have as far as like buying tools, it comes from my uncles, and they're not like, they're finished carpenters. There's a difference,
right.
They're on job sites, so they work with trim and whatnot, versus like I feel like a true like woodworker, the tools are different. Even the brands are different, you know? So for me, like I'm because I've been influenced by my family. So all my tools are DeWalt. So I mean it's not a bad brand. It's a great brand actually, but you know, it's not for fine finishes. So for now, like I feel like, okay, this is good for me to start to learn. I think once I get better and, you know, if I start getting more serious about like maybe building a piece of furniture with hardwoods and whatnot, I think then I'll start looking into like, oh, you know, maybe I should change that table saw for like maybe a saw stop, you know, something that's a little more for fine finishings, you know. But yeah, so for now that works for me. I still haven't figured out like a setup. I have my miter saw is on I have a workstation for it and it's on casters so I can move it around. And, you know, I actually, again, I got the plans off of Bitterroot DIY. So it's got the wings on it. So it's very like, I can move it. It's very, very versatile. And then the table saw is a worksite table saw. So I do have the stand for it. So I can also move that around. But I feel like one of my biggest challenges is, you know, like the dust collection, you know, because, you know, you have, even if you move your stuff around, like you have to take the shop vac wherever you go or whatnot. So I haven't quite figured out, I haven't actually spent time like trying to plan it out better. Right now it works for what I need it. But yes, that's definitely a project that I'd like to pay a little more attention to, because I think that that's a big part of just woodworking in general. Like you have to have a good setup. You know, you don't want to be like walking from one side to the other, dragging stuff all over the place. Like, you know, it's just easier if you have it in a good setup around you. I think the biggest investment that I've made that has definitely been worth the money was investing in a dustless sander. So this summer I bought a Mirka sander and then I bought the Festool extractor. And, you know, everybody who does any sort of DIY carpentry, everybody hates sanding. I hated sanding, you know, and now it's like a dream. You know, it's quick, it's, you know, leaves your stuff beautiful, like softer than a baby's bottom, you know, and it cuts down your work time by, I don't know, at least 75%, you know, that has made such a huge difference. And so I think like, and again, I went ahead and made that investment thinking, you know, okay, I make it now and it's going to last me a long time and I can use it, especially when it comes to working with hardwoods. So yeah, that's for right now, that's what's working for me.
Yeah, I would say most woodworkers tend to eventually get to a point where they say it's worth you cry once, spend the big money once, and it's worth it because it will last forever. You know, most of these tools are made to last the rest of your life if you take good care of them. So
yes,
you know, you only make that purchase once, and it's usually just like higher precision and quality versus like, okay, if I buy the $30 sander,
right,
in a year I'm buying another $30 sander. Like, you know, it's not meant to last forever. So we're actually getting towards the end of our time together, so I want to be sure to give you a chance to let people know like how they can find you and follow along with your projects and stuff.
So I am on Instagram, so it's at Texas DIY Mama. I am working on starting a blog. I want to say probably the next couple of months, because I do think that that's good for just to have evergreen, you know, to have it there forever. So look for that.
Okay.
And that's pretty much it, those two things. But yeah, right now the Instagram, that's my main. my main platform right now that I'm using.
Okay, awesome. And I'll include the link to that in the show notes so people can find you easily. Okay. And thanks for chatting with me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. All right. So again, that was Adriana of Texas DIY Mama. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe, like, comment, leave a review. All of that helps the podcast get discovered by potentially new listeners. And speaking of which, please make sure that you share about this podcast with a friend or two or three. I've shared now for a few weeks that I have a goal of hitting 10,000 downloads in a month by the end of the year. And right now, averaging about 2,500 downloads a month. So I've decided to break it down a little bit more instead of trying to make a big jump. I'm aiming for just 4,000 right now. Let's hit 4,000 downloads in a month, aiming for 1,000 downloads in a week. And this week we are definitely well on our way. So help cross that finish line, sitting at 600 downloads right now as I'm recording this Tuesday evening. So help get that additional 400 to get that 1,000 downloads this week, and we will be well on our way to hitting 4,000 by the end of September. So please and thank you. Yes. All right. When I am not making podcast episodes, you can find me designing and making furniture and other home decor over at freemanfurnishings.com and at Freeman Furnishings across pretty much all of the social media. I am active most frequently over on Instagram almost daily, and that's at Freeman Furnishings. And second to that would be TikTok. So check me out over on those two platforms. Say hey, say you found me through the podcast. I love to hear that. And while you're following along with Freeman Furnishings, make sure to follow along with the podcast as well over on Instagram at Crafting Revolution. All right, we are midway through the week. I hope you're having a great week so far and had a great weekend. And as always, let's go craft a revolution.
Got something they wanna say. Solution for the toxic masculinity's pollution.